The legislature over the course of the last two General Assemblies that I've had opportunity to participate. And I've said this quite often to many of you I know that have been in the press room with me taking some questions, and this might sound like repetition to those of you that we just sat down with, but when we really look back on what we've been able to accomplish over the last two former General Assemblies with Speaker Batchelder's leadership, we've really had opportunity to focus on strong recovery for our state, closing an $8 billion budget deficit, helping increase our credit rating in the state, cutting taxes for Ohio's businesses and citizens so that we can continue to put money in their pockets, continue to grow jobs, and today we're at a 4.8% unemployment rate. And that's what we are all about in this caucus, of continuing to move the ball forward in the right direction, continuing to do things that make Ohio's quality of life number one. More than 285,000 jobs grown. We've put $1.5 billion in the rainy day fund. We've got great legislators like Representative Johnson and Representative Sprague who've led an effort, including Representative Smith and others. They have led an effort on the opioid drug addiction issues that throughout the state, and there's yet more to come on that issue because Ohioans are our number one priority. The citizens of this state are our number one priority. Making sure that we continue that quality of life, making sure that we continue to move the ball forward in the right direction that provides in this General Assembly mobility and stability for our communities and for our families and for those that are in our state to make this quality of life number one. So what you're going to hear today is a little bit about our agenda and where we're going forward into the future. And I think it's exciting. And it's focused on the number one priority, and that's the citizens of our state, to ensure that that quality of life remains strong and to ensure that every citizen has the opportunity to reach out and gain that hard work and not to be have the opportunity to go out and seek good work and not be underemployed and find that mobility to continue to move themselves in the right direction. We're going to look at helping our minority communities, and most importantly, we're going to ensure that this caucus, the number one priority is to not only help those minority communities and continue that eye on the citizens, but empowering women. And in February of this coming up next month, we'll start a forum that I've asked Representative Coonsey and Representative Polanda to continue to have across the state that talks about just that and how do we help empower women throughout this state and continue to put them in the right area. You're going to hear a lot from a lot of our some of our leading members of this caucus, but what we're going to talk about is not so much priority pieces of bill, but our future determination of what we want to look at as a caucus. You're going to hear about Ohio 2020 and a 6-year plan that what we're going to look at is what we think in 4 pillars of this, which you'll see up here on our PowerPoint slide as things go, focusing on energy, focusing on education, focusing on competitiveness for our state, and most importantly, focusing on health care here for the state. So these are issues that we're going to be focused on. And if you think of Ohio as a stool, and what are those four pillars that keep us strong, those are the 4 areas and pillars that we believe keep this state strong. We're going to continue to work strong with our neighbors and our partners in the legislature, both in the Senate and Ohio, or in the governor's office. But let me be clear, this is an institution that will lead on its own and have an agenda to push forward for the right things to put Ohio on the right path. And so with that, I want to continue to get this press conference on the road so you can hear from other members. But here's the reason we're talking about Ohio 2020 and about these 4 pillars. Because this is what we're going to do. Every member's bills are priorities to us. It's not just a few like 1 through 5 or 1 through 10. Our priority should be on a longer term focus. Our priority should be on how do we continue to sustain our state and how do we continue to allow people to move up and give them that mobility. And that's what we're going to focus on, and I hope you'll be excited by some of the things we hear. You've got 5 bills that we're going to talk about. And I'm going to turn it over to Representative Polanda who's going to expound upon our 2020 idea a little bit.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, we've done a lot to build a solid foundation in many important areas. Now, and especially in the area of legislative term limits, we need to look for long-term and sustainable solutions to allow for a more stable future for our great state, with the goal of much of this being complete by the year 2020. We will let data drive areas for the legislature to improve, and we will examine what other states might be doing that could work in Ohio. 2020 is not this package of bills we are discussing today, but a member-driven plan that will allow the entire caucus to work together over this General Assembly to build each pillar with ideas for a more stable state. Several of our caucus members will discuss the 4 pillars that our caucus will look to improve upon over this General Assembly and important legislation we will look to accomplish in each area. It is my privilege to introduce Representative Ryan Smith to discuss the first pillar, which is competitiveness.
Thank you. I will touch on the first pillar of competitiveness, and just to begin with, our group took a holistic view of competitiveness, and we tried to take a step back and say, what are all the components that make up competitiveness and affect Ohio's companies and their ability to compete nationwide? We could go on from a standpoint of bills on this particular topic, and I hope that we will proceed in that area, but I'll touch on a few here in a minute. The competitiveness theme of 2020 addresses a wide variety of policy areas that ultimately affect Ohioans' quality of life and impact Ohio's competitiveness nationally and globally. Competitiveness will focus on tax issues, transportation and infrastructure, and a variety of other policy areas. The heart of competitiveness is our desire and need to continue creating an environment for economic development to thrive in the state of Ohio. We intend to pursue policies that do not punish entrepreneurial success, but promote regulatory reforms that will increase business creation and entrepreneurship in Ohio. According to a study by the University of Nebraska using statistics from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, Ohio ranked 42nd in the nation in 2013 in U.S. Entrepreneurship Index. Simply put, we need to adopt and embrace policies that encourage entrepreneurship. A few legislative examples that I will mention today. First, new business filing fee reduction. Even before an entrepreneur in Ohio makes his or her first dollar as a businesswoman or businessman, the state of Ohio assesses a $125 filing fee. These fees are assessed by the Ohio Secretary of State and help fund the Secretary's operating budget. We plan to cut the filing fee by 21% so that Ohioans who create a new business will only pay a $99 business filing fee. This is a small first step in continuing to encourage entrepreneurship. Ohio Means Jobs revisions. We've made great strides in Ohio's Jobs One Stop with the creation of Ohio Means Jobs. We are working with the administration to identify more ways we can enhance the functionality of the website so that we can better connect employers with those looking for a job. The next is Ohio Business Gateway. The Ohio Business Gateway serves as a portal for Ohio businesses and connects them to state agencies. We are working on identifying areas of the portal that can be enhanced to streamline functionality, specifically around the redundancies that exist when business owners are filing forms with state agencies. With that, I'll turn it over to Representative Derrickson to talk about Healthier Buckeye.
Thanks, Chairman Smith. I want to really first compliment the Speaker for his comments about mobility for all families, upward mobilities for all families in the state. And he has certainly reflected that by creating a committee titled the Community and Family Advancement Committee. Speaker, thanks for that. You have certainly allowed us as a caucus to engage in a conversation that frankly we haven't engaged in the past. This is a conversation about wrapping around services and helping people who really need some help. This committee, and there's been a lot of questions asked about the existence of this committee, its goals, its purpose, and I can sum up the purpose this morning by sharing this. The purpose of the committee is to bridge the gap between good-paying, sustainable jobs and barriers that keep people from obtaining them. Now, an example of legislation in the 130th General Assembly that would certainly align itself with this particular committee is a piece of legislation that Ron Omstutz championed titled Healthier Buckeye, Healthier Buckeye program. That particular program provided upward mobility to people with many barriers in their life, barriers that simply restrict them from obtaining good-paying jobs. The goal for Healthier Buckeye is to, again, kind of wrap around folks, bring people to the table at the local level from services that range from education, healthcare, social services, churches, nonprofit organizations. Again, kind of meeting these folks where they are versus just dictating them where they should be. Our goal, again, is to address in this committee legislation much like Healthier Buckeye Week. Look forward to continuing the conversation on that particular bill or that particular legislation, but also other programs, again, to wrap around services for folks who really need some help.
I guess I'm next. I'm Kirk Schuring, and I'm very pleased to announce that today we'll be introducing a bill that will create the Ohio Higher Education Workforce Development Grant Program. It's a bill that seeks to match Ohio's higher education students with the in-demand jobs in our state. It will create a grant program of up to $5,000 for students who are pursuing coursework that will lead to a certificate, associate's degree, or bachelor's degree that ultimately will help them land an in-demand job. It has an experiential component that will require a student to spend up to 3 months in a workplace setting that's similar to the in-demand job they're seeking. This will give the student the opportunity to see what the workplace is really like and get a feel for whether or not they want to continue on that path. It also will give an opportunity for employers to develop a relationship with the student, so hopefully that will lead to employment in the future. Lastly, it says that if, in fact, the student who is under this grant program gets their certificate, their associate degree, or their bachelor's degree, and lands one of those jobs, we're going to give them a 25% tax credit on their student loans. At the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, it's all about making sure that we have a workforce that is educated and has the skill set that meets the requirements of our employers. But probably more importantly than that, we want to make sure we keep the best and brightest right here in our state. And we think this will help in that endeavor. I'm very honored to have the opportunity to be a joint sponsor with Representative Manning, and again, he and I will be introducing the bill today. It has the strong support of the Ohio Association of Community Colleges and the Inter-University Council, and hopefully more support to come. Thank you very much. And I'll turn it over to Dave Hall to talk about energy.
Thank you, Kirk, and thank you, Speaker, for your leadership and the leadership team. My component is on the energy side. As we move forward this state in 2020, we have to make sure that we have a strong energy package. As we woke up this morning, and my area was -4 degrees, and you start thinking, you take things for granted, the energy side of turning your light switch on and having warmth in your home. So our component working on these issues is making sure that we focus on Ohioans, making sure they have reliable energy, affordable energy, and safe energy. So we're putting forth ideas and bills, as you're going to hear in the next coming months, dealing with what's happening in the sector about best available technology. And as we move forward, we'll be working on regulatory bills. We're going to be working on issues that pertain to the last General Assembly. Then Speaker-elect Rosenberger reached out to me after House Bill 490 had stopped its tracks in the Senate and asked me to start pulling apart 490 and pieces of 490 you will see in coming bills in the future. But also we were able to work on some of the energy side, which you will be discussing on a bill with unitization. And that issue is basically dealing with property rights, landowners where state highways divide properties. And we had that in House Bill 490, and we'll be tweaking it and moving that forward. Also, the application process is lagged behind in the process of unitization, and we will move that along within a bill. Also, working with the ad valorem tax, the issue of codifying in law to help the county auditors understand where we're going and how to tax the proper resources underneath that political subdivision. So it looks like we're going to have a lot on our plate with the energy side of having a great energy policy. We're not going to fall on our faces what Washington D.C. has done, and we will move the state forward and reassure all Ohioans that we'll have, like I said, safe, dependable energy. Thank you. And next will be Representative Beakey.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative. Ladies and gentlemen, through the leadership of Speaker Rosenberger, We are committed in the House Republican caucus to move forward working with the governor and the Senate, President Faber and the Senate. We have made the commitment to improve our water quality. It's a big issue. We all know about what happened last summer up in Toledo, and certainly in western Ohio. With agriculture and municipalities, the issue is how do we make that water better and cleaner? And how do we reduce and hopefully someday eliminate the algae problem that has caused a lot of issues. So I'm happy to see Agriculture Chairman Brian Hill here. This Thursday we are going to have a hearing in Van Wert to listen to folks in the agriculture community to tell us their ideas and their issues that they can glean from us to help them continue to improve water quality. At the same time, 2 weeks later, there will be another hearing in Toledo to listen to the municipalities and the north coast of Ohio talk to us about the same thing, so that we have the farming side issues that they can present to us and ideas and requests, and the municipalities on the north coast. So coupled with those hearings and gleaning information from those folks, we then will put together legislation that will help us clean up the water in Ohio so that we don't have future incidents like we had in last year. So that's the big issue coming in water quality, and we're gonna make real improvement there. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Speaker Pro Tem Ron Onstutz to talk a little bit about education.
Thank you and good morning. The topic of education has already been brought forward by previous speakers, and that's because the pillar themes that we are advancing all have interactivity and they relate to each other and have connections. The success in the education world relates to the idea of having a life plan for individuals, whether they be 15-year-old Ruby, who is a freshman in high school and might have to decide whether she's going to go to a career center or what kind of track she's going to be on, what are the issues that she aspires to, what are our interests, or whether it might be Fred, who's 47 years old and has crashed and is not able to sustain himself, let alone his family, and needs a lot of intensive help at the community level. Those are all things that require some kind of educational plan if they're to be effective in the workforce. One of the visions that we have, and by the way, this is an early stage work in progress. We are developing a collaborative plan. And so what you're seeing today is just the first set of examples of things that we're introducing to prime the pump. But we are developing a process that will involve the education community, the family structures, which is where education starts, let's face that, and it will involve many stakeholders outside the General Assembly and our own caucus and across the aisle. We are noted that yesterday's comments by our colleagues on the other side of the aisle I think are very compatible with the things that we're trying to work on, and they mentioned their aspirations in the education area. So these are things that we look forward to partnering across many directions in the future as we go forward. The idea for a 2020 vision is that let's not be too short-termed here, just look for some headlines. Let's look for where we want to be as a state going forward in a major way. And so I'm just simply underscoring the good work and leadership of our speaker on this issue. In the area of education, one of the themes and directions that I sense we're heading, and you'll see this in some of our bills, is we are looking to have our private sector partners, the employers, reach out and draw what they need from the education community. The pull there has been an area of difficulty in Ohio, and we want to work at trying to help convene that, to catalyze that, and to make it work more effectively. pushing folks out through educational tracks has caused us to have some of these gaps that we have now, where individuals might be on a good education track and then don't find a good path to effective employment, or they might actually drop out of the educational path because they don't have a vision for where they're going with their life and their efforts to try to find a vocational path that they have passion for and can be productive in. So those are, the employment sector can really help us there, and it's been an area that we're concerned about and want to try to focus on. So the examples that you're going to hear today are just samples. They're just some of the examples of the work that we're going to be doing, and we're going to introduce you to one of those examples now. We have a bill being introduced that will address the area of our community schools, which is a nascent part of our system of schools that's been developing for a number of years. But we've noticed that our system here, as it relates to community schools, has maybe not been ranked quite where we'd like it in terms of how we structure and regulate it. I think in a recent report, we're at 28th in the nation by one measure from the National Alliance for Public Charter Schools in their 2014 report. We don't want to be 28. So we are introducing a bill that will be led by Representatives Davila and Roegner to address many of the recommendations that were recently received here specific to Ohio, and will be advancing in collaboration with the many interested parties a bill. And to introduce that, I'm going to have Representative Davila come forward and have some explanation of that particular bill. And they're a joint sponsor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. I want to thank the Speaker for asking me to partner with Representative Roegner on a community school reform bill that we'll be introducing here very soon. It's good to return to to education as an issue. Spent some time on the Education Committee during my first term as the Vice Chairman as we were working our way through the Cleveland Reform Plan at that point. This is the first initiative of the education bill that we'll be looking at, Charter School Reform Bill, and as I indicated, Representative Roegner and I will be sponsoring this bill. The provisions of our legislation will fall into three primary categories: accountability, transparency, and responsibility. And these build on legislative efforts that we've undertaken in previous General Assemblies. And I would note that this bill is simply a starting point for the reform of our state's community schools. This will remain a work in progress as we go through the committee process in the coming weeks and months. I'll just talk a little bit about the accountability piece. Representative Roegner will then talk about the other two elements of the bill. So the bill will take a number of actions to improve accountability, such as prohibiting sponsors from selling services to schools they sponsor, clarifying provisions of contracts between schools and schools' governing authorities, providing better accounting for sponsor oversight and technical assistance expenditure, and eliminating sponsor hopping by poor-performing schools. That's the accountability portion. There'll be more detail to it as we move ahead, but I would invite Representative Roegner to speak about the other two portions of the bill.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm Christina Roegner, and I also look forward to working with Representative Davila on this piece of legislation. Representative Davila mentioned the accountability pieces. Let me just do a very deep dive into the responsibility and transparency. So under transparency, we want to improve the transparency regarding the sponsor finances. So this bill will require school sponsors to annually report their expenditures made to monitor or to provide technical assistance to these schools. Another component of transparency, something very real and tangible that you'll see coming forward, is that we'll increase the transparency in these contracts, the contracts between the school and the management company. ODE will receive copies of these contracts between the school's governing authority and the management company, and Representative Davila and I would like to actually see that published then on the website. Another area of transparency is to track and to monitor this management company's performance overall. So effective July 1st of 2016, the Ohio Department of Education will annually publish a performance report for these community school operators. And one last piece of transparency that I'd like to mention, and there's much more in the bill, but this just gives you an idea of what's in there, is it'll require the board members to disclose family members or any business associates that would be doing business with the school. So again, all that in the spirit of transparency and openness. We also mentioned the third bucket, which is responsibility. And that sort of really gets at the heart of conflict of interest. So a couple examples here would be that this legislation would prohibit employees or vendors under contract with these schools from actually serving on the board, on the governing authority of these schools. Another area of responsibility is that we would prohibit sponsors from selling their services to the schools. And just the very last sort of concrete example I'd like to leave you with on responsibility is that these school treasurers will be independent of the management companies or the sponsors, and they will in fact be employed by or under contract directly with the school. So those are just a couple of very tangible, very real examples of things that you can look forward to in the bill that I am very much looking forward to introducing with Representative Davila. Thank you.
Thank you very much for everybody being here today. I really appreciate the Speaker for giving me the opportunity to round out today's press conference with you by giving me the most exciting and funnest pillar of all to talk about, and that would be, of course, the health care pillar. You know, as we continue to move forward in this upcoming General Assembly, it's critically important that we continue to look at how do we improve access, not only access to our program within the Medicaid system or the workers' compensation system, but also access as it relates to private insurance policies, those that we go home and we use every day. We want to make sure that we're looking at access and also affordability issues. One of the ways that we hope to make sure that we're doing that is by creating a policy and an atmosphere that allows creativity and innovation to come to Ohio. So Ohio is ripe for some of the innovation that we're looking at around the country. While we're doing that, we need to make sure that our policies and our innovation are very focused and very geared towards demanding some kind of measurable outcome, so that we know that the dollars that we are investing, your dollars, your taxpayer dollars, are actually being used in an appropriate and effective manner as we move forward. You know, Medicaid is the largest portion of the state budget. So taking care of it and making sure that we're managing it appropriately is the best way we can ensure Ohioans are getting the best bang for their dollar. In doing that, we're going to be looking at working with our private partners and also going into our public partners and asking them to remove those silos that we have that function very independently and refuse to look at and recognize the silo that's right next to them. The new buzzword of the day is apparently cylinders of excellence. So we need to all say cylinders of excellence. And we're replacing that with the term we're replacing silos with that term, with the idea that we need to know that these are all cylinders, meaning they're moving, they're growing, they're actually moving forward, and we need to make sure that we're using those as we engage change and innovation in the healthcare. Through what we do in the General Assembly, a lot of our work in the human services area really centers and focuses on what happens in the budget. Because human services, you're touching a lot of independent lives, you need to move slowly but determinedly as you go forward, and so it begins with the subcommittee work as we set the stage for the policy. We'll be taking that budget, making it our own budget as we move through subcommittee meeting and creating our priorities. You know, as we look at specifically what we're intending to do with it, it will all focus on how we innovate, how we manage, how we create an atmosphere of engagement on behalf of our participants in the program, with the sole outcome for those that can. Obviously, we know that in Ohio, some of our Medicaid folks will never have the opportunity and will never look to the opportunity to getting off of Medicaid and off of entitlement programs, and we need to respect that. But we also know that we've got a core group of folks whose mission should be to use Medicaid and our state entitlement programs as a transition to somewhere else in their life. So we're going to be focusing that in this upcoming General Assembly. We will, however, be looking at a couple of very specific areas. Infant mortality, which is one of the areas that we started in the last General Assembly. Certainly the Senate took the lead for us in that area. It's critically important. Not only is it a human driver in the state of Ohio, an emotional driver in the state of Ohio, but bluntly, for taxpaying purposes, it is a financial driver in the state of Ohio, and one that we really need to wrap our arms around and find out really what can we do to drive forward that mission. And I think we look forward to working with the Senate as they really champion that issue and we do our part in the House side. Certainly we'll be looking at the Medicare and the Medicaid program. you know, the Medicaid program and the workers' compensation program. What can we do to continue to develop and bring forward managed care that really looks at the entire person? One of the most exciting reasons why healthcare is the best pillar, again, thank you, Speaker, is that it really, if you believe in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you know that healthcare sort of subs in for that bottom layer. Healthy people can be educated, healthy people can have jobs, healthy people can live independent lives, healthy people can move forward. And so we need to make sure we're engaging that full continuum of care as we look at our program. So we'll be looking at reforms in that area, of innovations in that area, and how do we make sure we're getting solid outcomes for every cent that we're investing in those programs. Our entitlement programs. You know, an entitlement program should be a pathway. It should be a transitional pathway. It should not be a forever pathway for the vast majority of folks in Ohio. And we really need to ask every one of our entitlement programs, what are you doing to not just encourage people to participate in the program, but where is their process and their pathway out of that program? So we're going to be challenging these programs to do that. Unemployment insurance certainly was a topic that we studied over the summer, and we're going to be introducing some very specific legislation in the near future, having to look at how we're deriving income, how we're handling our benefits, and most importantly is the governance process that we have in place, those policies around governance and administrative. Are they effectively managing that program? One that you'll see in very short order works on our heroin epidemic. You know, we've struggled with how to not only fix the problem, but we know that this problem took years and years to come to fruition, and now it is here exploding in Ohio. In fact, for the last 10 years, we've been one of the top 10 states in Ohioans who have died for unintended accidental overdoses. That's got to stop. We are fortunate that we've got a crew of representatives who've really tackled this as a primary mission for them, and the naloxone protocols will be coming back to us in full steam with the intent of getting this passed so that we can provide some life-saving protocols for Ohioans. You know, naloxone and the protocols wrapped around it provides us with the ability to essentially reverse an overdose. Additionally, it's a drug that cannot be abused itself, which allows us to do this in a way that is appropriate. Working with our pharmacies and our physicians, establishing solid protocol so that we can do this in a non-prescriptive way, so that we make this more available to Ohioans, so that we can no longer be in that top 10 category. That is one we don't want to live in. So with that, I will close, and I'll again state that, you know, it's the goal of the Speaker and the 2020 vision to make sure that legislation that we do not only produces the assistance that is needed by Ohioans, but make sure that we're providing a pathway to a healthier and more independent lifestyle. And I'm certainly looking forward to working with all of our partners on what I believe is the most exciting pillar there is.
Thank you, and thank you to the team. Before we close, though, I want you to look around, because there's a lot of people on this team that's going to proffer and help with a lot of different avenues that meet these pillars. And we have a lot of chairmen. We had Chairman Hill here with the agriculture. Chairman Hayes is here. I know Chairman Yowski's here with our local government. Our subcommittee chairman of transportation, Cheryl Grossman's here. Our new government accountability chairman's here. This is going to be I see Andy Brenner, our vice chair with education. We've got a great team put in place that are going to continue to look forward to how do we look at the data and how do we drive that data to make sure we're doing the right things to put Ohio in a smart future. We're going to work with our partners, and not only are we going to work with partners in the Senate and with the governor, but we're going to challenge our partners out in the private sector too. NFIBs and chambers, the educators. We're going to say, come to the table, because the day of which you find something in the budget and you ring the fire alarm and say this is a problem or over, we want people to come to the table and help us with solutions, and that's what we're going to be about. And that also extends to Leader Strayhorn and the Democrats and the Democrat caucus. We look forward to working with them and building a great relationship that continues to find common ground and consensus that we can put the right things forward for our state. So with that, we'll open up to some questions, and then I'll happily share this opportunity to take questions with the team up here.
This is probably for Representative Sears. Where does Medicaid expansion fit into this? Do you start with the reforms that you're talking about with the assumption that Medicaid expansion is in place moving forward?
Look, I think we talked about this earlier, and by the way, we didn't talk about repealing Medicaid. That came up in some headlines, but the issue is at hand that what I said is, look, I think we're talking about reauthorization and looking at what we can do to continue to keep the things in focus, keep the cost controlled, continue to look for mobility, and access is extremely important, especially in rural areas. Access is extremely important. So we're going to look at those initiatives. I'll have Ron step up too, because I think this Healthier Buckeye initiative is extremely important in talking about this process.
Well, we can have a fight over, you know, a topic like, you know, the expansion thing, but that's old news. Or we can focus on what we're going to do to actually help people over the rough patches. I think that's where the governor's headed. I think that's where we're headed. That doesn't mean we're going to agree on everything. But I think that the space that we want to work on is one that can be very bipartisan, and we'll focus on, you know, we do have big differences with some of the federal policy that's in place, and we're going to address those, but we're not going to let that get in the way of actually helping the people of Ohio who are struggling. The changes and fixes that need to happen at the federal level, we will address those, and we do have those concerns, but they aren't the expansion question as much because that's a gap. That's just a gap. That's another barrier for some people in some spaces to get to better places, and we're focused on helping them get to better places. Now, we're going to come at it from different directions. You know, some would like to see more governmental program than others. Others would like to see more community-based, private sector emphasized approach to this. So we're not going to all come at this from the same perspective, but that doesn't mean we can't work together to find a good place.
Specific to your question, I only wish that I had an opportunity to see an advance copy of the budget and whether or not it'll be in there or not. But the reality is that the state plan amendment that is currently in place already has expanded Medicaid in it, so that is really kind of off the table as far as that question. The question comes in is our decision and ability to fund, right? Because that is in our purview and that is one of our responsibilities. You know, as we go forward with this, I think it's very incumbent upon us to make sure that we recognize we're in a unique place, and that is where the federal have come in with this additional layers of dollars that eventually will go away. And if we don't ensure that the Medicaid program is cost effective and that we can justify the dollars we're spent in it, then I think that you can look at any General Assembly's need to roll it back if it's not producing measurable outcomes that are cost effective.
Just to follow up on that, what do you see as problems with the federal policy, and what can you do at the state to address that? Do you do it through a waiver or?
Thank you. So, you know, the state of Ohio is incredibly innovative in how we're managing our Medicaid program, to the point where we are actually more innovative in many ways than the federal government is. And yet there are boxes around what they allow us to do, and they allow us to do waivers, and we have new waivers coming in place in 2017, and we can do state plan amendments.